Data science and software engineering are similar disciplines, but they're different, and people like to move from one to the other. So if you're thinking about making a transition from data science to software engineering or vice versa, then this video is for you. So keep watching and subscribe to this channel for more videos for software engineers. Hi, I'm Yulia Eskin, a Silicon Valley tech lead and a career coach for software engineers. This is the right channel for you if you want to get promoted, become a tech lead, or just be a better engineer. If you're thinking about making a transition from data science to software engineering or vice versa, there's usually two ways to go about it, either internally or externally. So what does that mean? An internal transition means that you're going to be looking for data science or software engineering roles within the company and making the transition from role to role within this company. An external transition means, for example, that you would have worked already as a data scientist, quit your job, and now you're applying for a software engineering position at a different company. External transitions are a little bit more challenging, and I'm not going to cover them in this video, but I can make one. Let me know in the comments if I should make one about that topic. In this video, I'm going to be talking about transitioning internally within the company from a data science to a software engineering role. And generally speaking, transitioning internally is typically the best way to transition into a role you have not done before because the company already knows you, they already trust you. You typically don't need to interview for that role. You just need to usually have a relationship with the manager on that team that interests you. So basically, doing the internal transition is a lot easier and there's a lot less people you need to convince about your skill set, about your competency, than if you were going to be transitioning externally. So here are three main stages in the transition from data science to software engineering. The first stage is the discovery stage. So what you're going to be doing in that stage is actually learning about what are the internal positions for software engineering that your company has. I'm assuming that if you're working as a data scientist for a company, then this is a company that also has engineering teams because typically those two functions exist within the same company. So most likely your company has openings, meaning new positions for software engineers, and they have a choice to hire someone from the outside or they can promote from within. And of course, taking somebody from within is a much safer bet than hiring externally. So look at your company's job postings and see if there are any open roles for software engineers. Even if there are not, don't worry, it doesn't mean that positions are not open, they're just not posted publicly. If there is a public position open, then take a look at the job description and take a look at what are the kinds of languages and technical skills that the position is looking for. They might be looking for Python, and I know a lot of data scientists also use Python in their jobs, so you already might have some experience in that. They might be looking for a specific language like Java, .NET, or Node.js that you don't have experience in, and this job posting is going to narrow down for you what are the things that you actually need to focus in your learning instead of exploring everything that an engineer might need to know. The next step in your discovery process is to actually figure out who are these engineering teams that are working at your company. And do you know somebody already from those teams? Are you already directly working with one of these teams? If you are, wonderful. If you're not, just go ask around, look at your org chart to figure out who are the leads for those teams, who are the tech leads, who are the engineering managers, and who are the software engineers on those teams. Next, usually these teams have a channel, maybe a Slack channel, or somewhere else where the team comes together to speak about their day-to-day work. Most of the time, these channels are open for anybody in the company, so you can simply hop in their channel and start looking at their conversations. This is going to give you a little bit of an idea of what their day-to-day looks like, who are the people in charge, who you might want to talk to, who seems approachable, just by reading that channel for several days. You can also look at the code repositories of these teams and start reading the code they're writing. The code is usually accessible for everybody at the company, especially if they're in a technical role like you as a data scientist. So as you start reading their code, it may also give you some understanding of what is it that engineers do, what does it look like to create that kind of code and these kinds of systems, and basically you're going to start getting familiar with the specific area that a particular team is working on. Lastly, you can look at their Jira task board or whatever other platform they use to organize their work, just to see what do the tickets look like, what kind of work are they doing, what is coming up in a few sprints, especially if you look at the backlog. And I'm going to tell you later in the video why that matters. So the next phase in your transition into a software engineering role is to connect. Now that you know some of the engineering teams, pick a few of the software engineers, maybe on different engineering teams, to talk to. Send them first some kind of Slack message or whatever platform you're using. Introduce yourself, say you want to learn a little bit more about what it's like to be a software engineer, and invite them either for a 30-minute coffee walk or for a Zoom meeting. When you meet with them, tell them that you're interested in being a software engineer one day and you would like to learn what it's like to be one. Ask them what does the role entail? What is a common day in their life as a software engineer? What kinds of languages and tools they use specifically in this company, and what have they used before outside this company that might be useful for a beginner engineer like you. Ask them a bit how they plan their work, how their teams are structured, and what kind of projects are they working on right now. And I think you should do at least 3 or 4 such conversations with different engineers at the company, because you also want to validate for yourself that what you thought engineering is actually what it is in practice at this company, and that you truly want to move into this role. It may be the case that once you have those conversations, you're actually going to realize that it wasn't exactly what you had in mind, and actually you're pretty happy in data science. So this is why it's so important to have these conversations, and a lot of times people like to call it informational interviews. So if after these informational interviews you realize that you are truly interested in continuing to pursue software engineering, this is where you want to now connect with a tech lead or an engineering manager on one of these teams, and particularly maybe even narrowing down a particular team that might interest you. When you meet with them, I think it would be great if you were transparent about your desires. Tell them that you might be interested in becoming an engineer at some point in the future, and ask if they could mentor you and could help you figure out how to prepare for such a transition. What do you need to study? Are there any courses they recommend for you to take? Are there any books that you can read? How does your current job and current skill set from data science translate into a software engineering role? These leads can really help you in that transition, and it's important to create these relationships early on, even if you're not going to transition into their team in the next year or so. This is basically you starting to create these mentorship relationships, and that's very important for having somebody who will advocate for you in the future to move into this role. Now, before you make any concrete plans on moving into those leads teams, let them know that you're going to have a conversation with your manager about your intention, because the lead you're talking to does not want to get into any political issues with your manager, especially if you haven't told them yet that you're interested in doing this. So reassure the engineering lead you're talking to that you're going to discuss all of this with your manager, but at this point, you're just hypothetically asking if there is a project in their team that you might be a good fit for. If there is a way that you could maybe start taking on little tasks from their team just as a way to kind of get a taste of it. Or maybe if it's possible to sit in some of their meetings, to basically job shadow an engineering team, to maybe pair program with one of their engineers. So there's all of these options about how you can experience and make a gradual transition into engineering. But make sure that this conversation right now stays a little bit more in the hypothetical until you talk to your manager. And so this is precisely the next phase, talking to your manager. So you've done all of this research, all of this networking, and you already have a team that potentially might be interested in you. This is where you want to come to your manager and make sure that you keep them in the loop. You don't want to create any drama between your manager and that team's manager. So first of all, don't be afraid about being transparent and honest. In a lot of companies, internal transitions are encouraged, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you grew to a point in your data science career that you decided you'd like to try something else, most companies are pretty open to that. So be honest with your manager that you're interested in growing into an engineering role in the future. Tell them about the timeline that you have in mind. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years. But be clear with them so that they know what to expect and they can plan around it. Your manager is your partner here, so ask them if it would be okay if you could spend some time of your work week, let's say a couple hours a week and then ramping up to more, on connecting with other engineers, on maybe like taking small tasks from other engineers, And also ask the manager if they have some ideas on how you could potentially become an engineer within your own team. A lot of data science teams will need some internal tooling, some testing tooling, maybe some REST APIs that their team could use. And if you take on that role, that is basically a responsibility of an engineer. And so brainstorm with your manager to see what are the opportunities within your current team, and also whether there are opportunities on other teams that your manager would be okay with if you spent your time there. And this is where now you can say that you've asked a certain manager in engineering to be a mentor to you so that you could start working on those skills, and so that your manager is aware of all the situation that's happening and how you've been reaching out to other teams. There is really nothing wrong with that as long as everybody is informed and nobody goes behind each other's back. And lastly, be patient that such a transition will not happen overnight. There may be some work that you need to do. You might be tied to certain launches, initiatives, deadlines that your team is part of, and it just might not be the right time to move, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. And so have a negotiation with your manager about what a timeline like that can look like, how can your manager support you in that transition, and what are other steps. Usually, as you get closer to such a transition, you might need to do an internal interview with the other team, or maybe do some kind of technical screen. You definitely will need to talk to HR because there's going to be a change of a position. So you can ask your manager how such processes typically work. But most importantly is to take initiative and be transparent with all of the people involved. So have you started doing this transition? What are your thoughts about your next step? Has this video been helpful for you? Let me know in the comments. And check out my website below about how I can support you as a career coach for software engineers. Thank you, and see you in the next video. Bye!